Okay, Mika, so we're talking about your kitchen written assignment.
Mhm.
We're going to go over your reflective statement first, then we'll look at the essay, and then I'll tell you what I think this would get if you mailed it in, send it in today. Okay, so obviously we weren't disgusted as a class, we discussed. Yes. Right? Okay. And really, to improve this score, we need a lot less about the book.
Mhm.
This paragraph here is pretty much a summary of kitchen, and this one's kind of a summary of moonlight shadow. You talk a little bit about death, and you talk a little bit about tea, but you're primarily talking about the two books and their plot. If you could go back to your notes and really focus on what you learned from the interactive world, the facts about Japan, and this is good about her family and being a liberal family, and reading. This paragraph's fine, but these two paragraphs we want to focus more on what you learned about either death and funerals, or the tea ceremony, or other things that you think are important or that you learned about in the interactive worlds, okay? The other thing that we need to do is to be very clear and restate it. Obviously not disgusted, but for each paragraph, kind of restate in the interactive world, or we discussed as a class. Just do that each time for kind of each paragraph, so that we're really emphasizing that you learned it in the interactive world. Okay? All right, now for the essay. Basically, green is kind of like good, yellow is caution, and then blue is yellow and green together, so there's something good and something cautionary. So for your first paragraph here, this is working towards what we want to see. We really don't need this introductory stuff here, especially you and your and that kind of thing, because that's not academic. Okay, we want to keep it focused on that third person. And what you've done here, I liked, you said, but you're setting up a contrast. You're saying we've got these characters who are experiencing some very difficult times, and they need friends, and we're introduced to people who help them, lead them out of their grief and sadness, but they also have special places, safe places, comfort zones that they need, or that they use to feel safe, right? What you want to do is, once you've referred to her as Banana Yoshimoto, for the rest of the time we're going to call her Yoshimoto.
Okay.
No banana Yoshimoto, just Yoshimoto, okay? And the same is true for every paper that you write. After you introduce them, Albert Camus, it's just Camus. Pablo Neruda, it's just Neruda, okay? Now, there's kind of two separate issues. One of them is sort of expressions or word choice. She grew a depression is not typically how that would be phrased. She goes into a depression, but the other issue is less. This is more of an expression, whereas this is more, to me, like an understanding. This is when she comes to realize that the place for her, while staying in her grandmother's home, she felt unsafe in her own room. I don't think that she felt unsafe. She's just lonely, right? It's not that I don't think that she's like seeing ghosts or like literally unsafe. It's more just uncomfortable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the real thing that we're emphasizing is that it's the hum of the refrigerator that kept me from thinking in my loneliness and it's the kitchen, obviously, where the refrigerator is located. I think it's maybe a combination of that sound and that place that help her sleep, which is so important. You know, if you can't sleep, you really will go off the deep end. Another example of where it seems like your knowledge of the story is not quite there is like this. She says, for example, she talks about a time when her grandma would always buy cut flowers so they wouldn't wilt. I think you might have misunderstood that. It's she buys lots of cut flowers, and that's how come she knows grandmother loved cut flowers because the ones in our kitchen were not allowed to wilt. She'd go to the flower shop a couple of times a week. So she's buying fresh flowers a couple of times a week. I mean, that A suggests that they've got some money. Because, I mean, even cheap flowers, that's $20 a shot, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's saying that she won't, it's not like literally they won't wilt. I mean, that's the whole thing. Cut flowers will wilt after 4 or 5 days at most. So because she doesn't want to see, grandma doesn't want to see wilted flowers, she's buying new ones very regularly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why she goes to the flower shop 3-4 times a week. That's how she gets to know Yuichi. And that's how Yuichi comes to find out about Mikage. Okay? So, it's just the way it's phrased, it makes it sound like, so they wouldn't, makes it sound like weird. You could just use the quote. Okay, that would be probably best. Because the analysis is, she felt alive. The kitchen is where maybe grandmother felt alive, and Mikage did too, because wilted flowers were not allowed in the kitchen. That's good. Okay, so it's kind of like flipping just that one little bit flips that entirely. Okay. Now, here, of course, we're going to say Yoshimoto. Instead of trying to show, Yoshimoto shows. Mikage uses the kitchen and the sound of the refrigerator to distract herself from being lonely. Okay? Now this is all in yellow because you don't have a quote in here at all. There is no evidence. Okay? It's all summary, mostly. What you get down to is the analysis that the kitchen is what she falls in love with, right? So start with that here, right? Yuichi, through the cut flowers, Yuichi comes and invites her over, and the first place that Mikage looks at is the kitchen. And she says, I fell in love with it, right? And you could say that foreshadows there, the fact that she's going to live there, or that things are going to go well for her. Maybe that's something you could point out. Okay? This next paragraph is, again, the best sentence is really down here at the end. The kitchen was Mikage's safe zone. It's where she felt comfortable and vulnerable. It was the place that she knew she could always trust and uses it to help overcome the death of her loved ones. You could move that again to the beginning of this sentence. But honestly, in terms of how the story works, it's like she kind of rehabs with the Tanabes and moves out. And when she moves out, Eriko is still alive, Yuichi is fine, and then she goes to cooking school, goes through cooking school, has got a place of her own, and is now working at the cooking school. She's kind of like the head assistant to the main teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she finds out that Eriko has died. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we've got to I'm going to put this maybe in blue. Because we need to see that she's a culinary assistant first,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or you need to make it clear, because it seems like it's
Out of order.
yeah, but it's true that the first thing she does when she gets to the Tanabe house is to clean the kitchen and then make this big meal. And that's how she and Mikage start to kind of mend, right, and reconnect. Now, at this point, we shift gears entirely and start talking about the bridge, essentially, and running, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about Moonlight Shadow. We need a sentence here that somehow, you could put it at the end of this paragraph or the beginning of this paragraph. But you're going to say something like, just as Yoshimoto uses kitchens to, or Mikage uses kitchens to recover from the deaths in kitchen. In Moonlight Shadow, Yoshimoto uses a bridge on the river and drinking hot tea to do the same thing. Okay? All right, that will help a lot in terms of the organization and development, so that it's not just, it seems like it's just kind of jammed up. Same kind of just general points of like, she is lacking sleep, she's losing sleep, okay? And instead of Setsuki, and she narrated, you could say something like, Yoshimoto uses the first person narrative. On the night that Setsuki can't sleep, she says, instead of, and she narrated, okay?
Yeah.
And this one, this is evidence towards the fact that whenever, you just take all that out and say Setsuki thinks about Hitoshi and her loss. And her, I think loss is what you're looking for here, instead of lost. And her, I'm not sure. She needs to go running. This is a little more summary than I'd like to see, without a quote. Okay, kind of like the other paragraph that's all in yellow. It's the primary issue, is we need evidence, and you might want to, obviously you want to discuss Urara. Is that bad? Was that awful?
No.
Urara. But you don't have to give us this much background. It's on the bridge. She meets Urara, and Urara, helps her ultimately overcome her loss. and a great quote again to support that. Okay? All right. So I'm going to stop the recording. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.